Hello everyone, my name is Codrin Pascal. I'm a full stack developer from Romania, currently working at Seheca. I don't know if you can tell by the logo. Sorry? Oh, yeah. And today I'm going to give you a small glimpse of what microfrontends are and how they can hopefully increase your team's scalability and reliability. Yeah, agility, sorry. Okay. That's it? Okay, let's go like this. So, throughout this small presentation, first I will give you some information about microfrontends, and then I will tell you what Webpack Module Federation has to do with them. And then I will try and demonstrate the two concepts in a small demo. I'll keep it short. And then I will tell you how to structure your application if you were to follow the microfrontends. We will talk a bit about the dependency sharing, and then about some security concerns. So, before we talk about microfrontends, did it work? It worked. First, we need to think about the normal way of using the front-end applications. That is the forever present monorepo with the monolithic approach where all your code is jumbled up into one big repo. And we all know and hate the feeling of modifying one simple component, then having to go through all the link components or the ones that have a dependency to it, try and fix the tests, and then eventually build the whole application just for that tiny little change that will occur in your application. To fix that, To fix that, we can introduce microfrontends. You can think of microfrontends as an extension of microservices, but for the frontend. Basically, you decouple your frontend application into smaller, individual, very structured and self-contained microfrontends, as the name suggests. Let's call them modules. That's not one team, but multiple teams can develop at the same time. And then the great part about it is that they can not only develop them, they can deploy them and manage their availability and scalability throughout the project, independent of one another. But it does sound good, but then you're wondering, should I use them and why don't I use them yet? When you think about microfrontends first, you circle back to the monorepo, you would think that even though it's cumbersome, it does have some advantages, especially for smaller projects. You have your whole code base structured inside the single repo. There's one deploy, there's one team, there's shared knowledge, and then there's shared responsibility. The moment you add more complexity to your project, more teams, different frameworks, different requirements, that's where you should introduce microfrontends. Basically, microfrontends will help you develop in not only one single front-end framework, but multiple. Let's say up till now you were using AngularJS or Angular or whatever, and then you have a new team that only works with React. Well, using microfrontends, you can just strap in their project and deploy it, and everything will work out of the box, probably easier than you actually expect it to. This does come at a cost. There's a bit of a complexity to developing it and managing all the microfrontends and all the submodules, and there's sometimes testing overhead. So whether you choose to use microfrontends or not depends entirely on your project, on your teams, and however you wish to proceed. Now that we know what microfrontends are, how do we make multiple applications work together? This is where Webpack Module Federation comes in. Webpack Module Federation is the choice I made for the demo today and the choice we used for our project. It's a built-in functionality for Webpack 5, so chances are if you're using Webpack, you're already using Webpack Module Federation. Maybe you don't use it for frontends, for microfrontends, but then you use it in a different way. It works with all frameworks that support Webpack, and it basically facilitates the runtime communication between features in different deployment groups. That means it allows you to import and export submodules from your different microfrontends into one application, or just strap them on a single whole clustered application. I should have pressed this further, sorry. Okay. Well, there's a lot of talk about it, and there's a lot of information about it. This is only a glimpse, but it's easier to show. So let me jump into my presentation. I forgot to change the theme, I'm sorry. But let me see if this works. Can you guys read? Hopefully it works. Okay, what we have here, it's kind of hard. Okay, so for the demo, I prepared two applications. One is a client application and the other one is an app shell application. They're both running in Angular 16. And the client application has only one component because I was lazy. And that's a very well-named component, my standalone component. But I already compiled it, so it's running on port 4201. Hopefully I didn't mistake it this time. Or 2001. The application shows you a rebel base in a galaxy far, far away. This rebel base, like in the movies, has the ability to summon an X-Wing. Just one, because we gotta be cost conscious. So let's do that. Not the greatest X-Wing, but it will do for the purposes of the demo. This particular X-Wing has the same capabilities as in the movie. It can fire torpedoes. But for now, it doesn't have a target, so it doesn't do much. So let's give it a target. We go back into our application, go to the shell app, source. There's a Death Star component, please ignore that. And the app shell should be running. Yeah, it is. And let's see the app shell. Voila. Now our X-Wing has a target. There's an innocent Death Star. I don't really want to shoot it, but the demo requires it, so come on, shoot. It's taking a lot of damage. It doesn't have a lot of life, just like in the movies, but I think in the movie it only took one hit, so mine is 30. And that's about it. What I did here is like I fired torpedoes using a custom event that was taken from my client application, and my app shell application responded to the custom event. Also, it instantiated the component exposed from the client app. You can say I'm lying about it. I could have just copied the code, but if I go in my main.js, you can see it's rendered from port to 4200. And if I go to search for the remote one, it's rendered from port 4201, which is the client application. So I didn't lie. That's it for the demo. Oh no, wait. Sorry, I got confused a bit. Let me show you a bit about our code and the configuration first, before I finish this. In the code, like I mentioned before, both applications have Webpack Module Federation configured, which means there's a Webpack config here. Here you can see that I'm exposing the well-named standalone component through Webpack, and then in the shell application, I don't necessarily need to do anything because Webpack already loads dynamically the modules exposed. But that means that in any component that I have, like this one, I can just instantiate the component that was exposed from the other client application and use it as it is. And in here, another great name. And then I added some handlers for the events, but that's all under the hood, so you cannot see my ugly code. Now, let's say that didn't convince you. You don't want to use Webpack. Some people have an adversity to it. Maybe some of them are not used to it. Maybe you'll upgrade it to Angular 17, which no longer uses Webpack. Then you might need some alternatives to it. Here I would like to mention first that single SPA, single page application, has a very extensive collection of demos for React, Vue, Angular, AngularJS, hybrids within those versions that are for legacy code or not. And for the purposes of those that use Angular 17, which no longer has Webpack, there is an NPM package, the native federation one, which basically does the same thing, but it doesn't require Webpack. So you saw how to create a micro frontend application, and then you saw some components, but that's not all there is to it. Let's say you have multiple micro frontends. How would you go about structuring your application? Well, there's mainly two ways of doing it. First, there's the app shell pattern, the one I present in the demo. This basically involves first loading a UI or a shell of the application. This usually involves like header, footer, menu, some login information, maybe a disclaimer, you name it. And then once that part is loaded and it's optimized to load that one very fast, then the app shell decides which subcomponents from the other micro frontends it should display. This is very useful for applications that want to keep the look and feel of the whole website without having to re-implement it in the micro frontends. If you have something a bit more complex, like a checkout page, a dashboard filled with analytics, a lot of subforms that require a lot of user interaction and a lot of hidden components, then you might want to try using the composition pattern. That one basically straps all the components in one single page, and then the user decides which, based on their action obviously, decides which items are presented from the existing micro frontends. So whatever you wish to use, it's up to your requirements. There is also a way of using both of them in a hybrid approach, but I would advise you to think that very well ahead of time because it can get really cumbersome. Now, we saw that our application is simple. It runs with an X-Wing and a Death Star, but if we have more complex applications, you might need to push styling to push static assets or have some shared components or code, some contracts that you need to implement. How would you go about fixing that? The answer is kind of basic and simple. You should use NPM packages and then have everything in a shared component library in terms of common code and shared components. And if you're using the app shell pattern, I would suggest having the app shell handle the static assets and the styling, so you don't have to go about routing the assets for each application. In terms of communication, the demo uses custom events. You can define a custom event and handle it however you want, but any pub sub will work as long as you implement it in both applications. And it is highly advised to not let the components communicate too much. Sometimes it's unavoidable, but keep it to a minimum if possible. If, for instance, you need to pass a job ID or some parameters that are simple, you can use the same as the APIs, just route them through the URL, because indeed it's still a micro frontend that's going to pick them up. And I just want to mention here, do not share your state. Some documentation will say that that's okay, but in practice, that's an anti-pattern. Sharing state can save up some time in implementation, but state changes often, and you're now not just coupling your components, this time you're coupling teams. You don't have the reliability that someone will adapt to your change fast enough, and that might actually cause your application to have unexpected behaviors. In terms of security concerns, I would like to address just two, because there's a lot of them. But first is a third-party dependency. This ties in perfectly with Webpack, but I'll explain it. Third-party dependencies, because they are in micro frontends, are handled by each team. Each team decides whatever third-party they use. It's not a problem, it's up to them. If, for instance, two applications use the same third-party, then you might have some issues with versioning. This can be mitigated through Webpack module federation, because that one allows you to enforce a certain version number for each shared third-party dependency, and that way you can avoid a lot of issues in the future. And then a lot of questions appear when you start implementing micro frontends about authentication and authorization. There's a whole discussion about it, but the best way to approach it is keep it simple. JWT tokens and single sign-ons should do the trick. You can still use your user information in all the applications, but you might have to authorize your user once in a while, just to be careful. So, in conclusion, micro frontends, they're great in some contexts, but maybe not for everyone. If your team has, or teams work on a highly complex project, you might want to give them a try, maybe demo it first, and then dive full in. Otherwise, monorepos will just do the trick. That's about it. Thank you very much for attending.